Hey, all right, I'm live. That took way longer than it was supposed to. I blame, I blame crappy internet. I don't know. Uh, okay, so I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items as I'm getting into this. So, welcome to the live stream for those of you who are actually tuned in. I'm seeing all three of you so far. Cool. If you like what you watch, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Share it with your friends. Um, if you know other people who would be interested in watching this, please do. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Garrett K. Jones. I am a local Hanford author, and I am in the process of working on my continuing or ongoing fantasy series called The Archives of a Sink Rain. It's a sword and sorcery type fantasy series that I've been working on for a few years now. So before I get into a lot of the content here, I want to plug a few things. The website, it's archivesoftheFiveKingdoms.com. You can find all the back content that you would see in the back of the book there. It would be populated there. And then I have my vlogs, which are here on YouTube. They can also be found on the website. And then I have my podcast, Creators Corner, which can be found on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as a few others. It can also be found on the website as well. Um, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. One thing I did want to say about the podcast is that in the next few weeks, I have an interview with Tanya Tizzy Miller, who is a local artist and filmmaker and writer and creative type here in the local area. She recently did a January installation at the King's Art Center, and I interviewed her because the content of her exhibit uh, dealt with the topic of substance use and abuse and mental health awareness, which played into one of the episodes of the podcast as I was going through and recording the content. So that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. I'll have promotional material to go alongside that. So let me check these things off my little list. Wanted to give a quick update about book 5 and the audiobook, and then I'll be getting into questions here in a moment. So as far as book 5, I am currently in the process of editing chapter 7. So I've edited the prologue and the first 6 chapters. That's going pretty well. It's taking a little bit more time because some of the chapters are a little bit more dense. And right now I'm doing the language edit, so I'm making sure that everything flows and it sounds good when it's being read out loud. Also, I wanted to say the audiobook has kind of been put on hold kind of indefinitely for the time being. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that yet. I might have to find a new narrator, so we'll see. And then finally, the update I wanted to give. I just worked out a new deal where I'm going to be getting new art done for the covers for books 1, 2, 3, and 4, all done by the same artist. It's a new artist that I'm working with, but I've known this guy for a long time. His name is Hank Keel. He does amazing work, on par with Alex Ross, for those of you who are big comics fans. So, yeah. So, now that stuff is out of the way, I've got the open forum. So, for those of you who are wanting to ask questions, cool. So, I'm seeing the first question here is from Granola God. I know who that is. It says, I've written something that I don't know how to build off of, and I don't want to erase it because it's a good idea and it should be included. How do you build off of a dead end? Well, there's a couple of things. You might have to back up a little bit, change the ending just a tad, and see the different branches where it can go. So usually things happen because of consequences. At least that's how I apply it. So when I feel like I've written myself into a dead end, one of the things I do is I go back, I reread it. Usually I have a fresh set of eyes who are willing to go through and read it with me, and I check them out. And what I look for is a place where there is a an opportunity to um, create consequences for the characters and their actions and decisions in the piece that I'm writing. Everything should segue off of that. So, say for example, you've got a character who has uh, just killed somebody. Well, what are the natural tendencies for someone who's already done that? They don't just sit there and hide. They run and hide. Maybe they're nonchalant like the Punisher and they just don't care, and they go about continuing on their business. Or, you have to think of based on circumstances and choices that have been presented to them. Um, so yeah, um, if you'd like, you're more than welcome to send me a copy of the file. If it's on a computer, you can send it to gkjpublishing@gmail.com. I can take a look at it for you and maybe provide you some notes and see what I can do to help you overcome that dead end. I love to work with other writers and see what we can do to come up with stuff to help them out. All right, so other questions. Let's see, we got one like. We had 5 people watching it at a time. Now we're at 3. Hopefully we'll get a few more. There's a few people I thought who would be definitely watching this for sure. So right now the forum's open. So topics range from, hey, Tanya's here. Awesome. I just promoted your the episode that you're going to be in, which for those of you who are interested, that episode will be dropping on Monday the 16th of March, and you guys will get. It was a really good interview to do. So, so topics range from writing, writing tips, publishing, uh, genre-specific questions. I write fantasy, but I'm also open to topics about science fiction and stuff like that. So, whatever questions you guys have, I'm open to answer them. With the caveat, I will not be answering any questions for those high schoolers who are interested in Alan Condi. That was a big issue that popped up on Instagram over the last month or so. And dear God in heaven, it was like being trolled by, I don't know, what's the freshman equivalent of a troll? I guess a goblin? I don't know. So we're 8 minutes into the stream. Got the one question. Yeah, writing has been actually going pretty well. In fact, I have. That's chapter 5. Here's chapter 6. I just got done editing this chapter, and there's a few pages where it gets. Yep, there's a lot of red ink spread onto these pages. Editing's been going well. It was kind of funny. I've been looking at the word count for the chapters as I've been printing them up and everything. And for chapter 7, which is the chapter just printed up the other day, no joke, over 10,000 words, including chapter heading. So that's a little daunting for just one chapter. It's like 35 pages long once you double space it. So, yeah. I'm going to give it another few minutes. If there aren't any more questions, I might end this early because, well, my wife made pizza, and God help me, I love pizza. So, yeah. No. No is the answer to a question. I'm verbally responding to just. Okay, any advice or tips on character and world building? Ooh, that's great. So, world building is always one of the trickier things. I'm going to start with that one first. You have to make sure that the world that you are creating is tangible. So you wanna think about um, the kind of environment that the characters exist in. So what kind of weather they have, what kind of climate, um, what the average temperature is like, what kind of precipitation they deal with, if any, weather patterns, geographic features is a big one. What kind of landscape you're dealing with. Um, you also want to pay attention in the world building, because it's always the small things. Okay, you can lay out how the world looks, and that's all superficial, and that's a good start. But you have to think about other things that make up the culture. You have to think about language. You have to think about um, their history. Actually, writing out a history or a timeline is a really great way of um, world building, because it gives you a sense of what's come before versus what's come after. If you actually go onto my website, and you click on the archives tab, um, that on that link there's an events section, and it's a historical timeline of everything of like the 5,000 or so years leading up to the events of book one, with the books following in that timeline up to where I am currently with the end of book four. So if you take a look at that, you can see what has happened, what's come in. Another thing that really makes the world bigger, brighter, more tangible is how the characters interact within it. Like, what are some of the laws within a given society? What kind of holidays or special observances they do? These are all crucial and key things. Um, Developing religious practices, things that are norms, things that are taboos. You got to take that into account. As far as character building, you kind of have to make that your own. I started making characters based off of myself and people that I knew as kind of the archetype, but then I started developing characters who were brand new off of that, developing them from literally the ground up, just making sure that they were real, tangible people. Um, I mean, we're always going to find some way to be inspired by whatever we're encountering around us, whether it's people, whether it's um, you know the world we live in. In fact, if you look at the map for books one, two, and three on my website, you'll find, especially in the world building, um, the layout for the first kingdom, near the end, is actually based on California. Uh, it's got the coastline. And just because I've traveled up and down the state enough to know what the environment is like. And some elements go into the Pacific Northwest, but that that's where I draw inspiration as far as landscape. As far as people, um, you know, some characters I developed were a natural offshoot, a natural consequence of certain things. Like, I knew I wanted to have the kids of the first generation characters to be a big part of the series. So where I'm at in book five takes a 20-year jump into the future, and I'm dealing with their kids. Um, Here's another good question. After getting your ideas written down, where do you begin writing, and how do you know it's good? Um, so as far as the beginning of writing, I actually create myself an outline. I've talked about this in the blog. I've talked about this in the podcast. Um, uh, I begin writing out an outline, kind of just a skeleton of what I want to see happen in the story, kind of a sequence of events, and a lot of it is based on um, character choices. A lot of it's based on certain plot points that I want to see happen. Um, Other elements for that, I then take a look at character decisions and choices. I look at the consequences that are going to happen because of that. Um, and I kind of weave together this tapestry of plot points, and then I write a chapter by chapter synopsis um, that helps kind of create the flow for what's going to happen. That's not to say that the synopsis is is set in stone. I actually will sometimes deviate from that because as I'm writing, the characters make their own decisions, and you think you're in charge of it, but you're not. Um, but I keep the synopsis on hand so that I have a base idea of where the chapter is going to go, where I want to start, where I want to end, and all the major points in between. The finer points that come between those major points, that's where things can get a little different. But yeah, that's pretty much where I go from there. Tanya has a good question. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and start writing stories from your dreams? Um, Sometimes, not really. It really depends on what I'm a pretty sound sleeper, so once I go to sleep, I'm pretty much out unless my dog wants out or it's time to feed the dog or whatever. Um, I haven't gotten up to write in the middle of the night just because. However, I have had moments where I've stayed up until like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to finish a chapter, trying to write it out and make sure um, that it's good. Actually, I wanted to back up to the previous question I just answered. As far as knowing that something I've written is good, um, it's kind of hard to say. It I like I can write something, it sounds great, and then I go back and I reread it, and I'm like, oh, man, what was I thinking? Um, I can get there. I mean, I found stuff that I used to write, when I was in elementary school, middle school, even stuff I wrote in high school, and I look back and I'm like, oh, that came out of my pen. That came out of my pencil. What was I thinking? It's disgusting. It's horrible. But then I have to think, well, I was, this was like 30 some years ago, 20 some years ago. So you kind of have to take that into account when you're considering uh, all of that. Um, if something's good, it's you're gonna feel it. You're gonna know. Um, but um, I get a lot of feedback from people who've read my stuff, and if something catches them off guard, or if they have kind of a wow moment, and they share that with me, then I know that I'm on the right track with what I'm doing. Granola God asks, what do you do when you lack motivation to write? Do you seek inspiration? If you do, where's the best place to go, or do you force yourself to get something out? That's a good question. It's a great question, in fact. So the last few days, I've been kind of just stressing, and the more stressed I get, sometimes I become more creative. Right now, I'm in edit mode, so I'm not actually writing anything. Um, but like the other day, I had the inkling to sit down and work on editing chapter 7. I pulled it out, I started marking it up, and then I got drowsy. I got tired. If you feel like you're kind of not feeling motivated to do anything, if you're not under any kind of time crunch or anything like that, don't worry about it. Step back from it, do something else. One of the things that I've found that is very helpful for the creative process is doing something hands-on. Last Saturday, I spent a good portion of the morning and early afternoon doing some pressure washing, um, and after like 3 hours of just sitting there with earplugs on and ear protection and all that, I had I cleaned off an entire driveway of grime. It's probably going to come back in the next few months anyway. And then and I felt better, and I was able to get things done. I was able to sit down, make some edits, knock it out of the ballpark. So it's just a matter of giving yourself something else to do that isn't going to require a whole lot of your attention. You can just do it and be mindless, and it clears out the cobwebs. Another question: what do you do when you have two good ideas that are included in the same story, but they contradict each other? Do you erase it and try again, or do you work and work until they fit together? That's actually a great. That's a really good question. There's a couple ways you can tackle that. One is you can tackle it as it's the same event happening from the perspective of two different characters, or it could be the perception of how an event is played by two different personalities. So one character, multiple personalities. That's the other thing that you might look at is I do need a spa day. um, so one of the things I did is I started working on two different story ideas back in 2012. One was kind of it started off as kind of a time travel thing where someone gets thrown back in time to medieval times, and the person was a soldier in the Revolutionary War. Um, then I had another one that was meant to be kind of a futuristic thing. Um, it was really kind of weird. It was like sci-fi fantasy type of thing. Um, and I lost interest in both of those, and I wanted to work on both. I thought that there could be something to them, and then a couple of years ago, I had this epiphany, and I realized that I had something on my hands, and I actually took the two ideas and I just kind of merged them together, and that actually became the story for book four. The book four was actually kind of born out of two different ideas, and after I got book three published, that really kind of just jump started how things were going to flow with those other two stories. Um, what was the best way to connect all your worlds together? Well, for me, everything in my books all takes place in the same world. So what I started doing was I started expanding out. Um, in the first book, you get an idea of what the Five Kingdoms is like, what Isran looks like. I mean, you can go onto the website, you can pull up the map for book one, and you get that idea. And while I don't go into all of the different territories in the Five Kingdoms throughout the course of the first book, as the books progress, you get to see more and more of that environment. To the point where by the time you get to the end of book three, going into book four, you get to experience a completely new location that is part of the world, but it's just so far separated that it gets to be this nice little adventure on its own. Um, and as I've been writing, as I've been exploring, um, the whole point is to expand not just the characters to the larger world around them, but for the readers as well. Um, so it all fits together. One of the joys about writing book five is that I get to explore. I was getting able to explore a new country. It's not new for me. It's new for the readers. It's new for the series. But the cool part about that is that I'm getting to actually explore the landscape. I've talked about it. I've mentioned it. I've commented on it, and uh, I actually um, it's been great because I've been able to build. Went back and mapped it out. I've looked at the location. It's been fun to generate this country and its origins and its culture and its people, its language, and it's been a lot of fun. Um, do you have plans to kill off any of the characters? Um, I don't go into writing a story with the intent of killing a character. I could get back. Book one, I did. Um, I had the intent of killing some characters, and it happened. And the reason why is because I wanted readers to know that just because a character might be a hero doesn't mean that they're untouchable. And just because a character might be a villain doesn't mean that they lose at, at the end of the story. Because we see that iniquity in the real world. Good people, bad things do happen to good people. Great things happen to terrible people. Um, so I wanted to play with that. Um, however, um, I I don't go around arbitrarily killing characters, and not like George R. R. Martin does in Game of Thrones. It feels very arbitrary, um, especially when you watch like the first couple of seasons. Like just when you get to like a character, it's like, oh, he offs that character. I don't do that. Um, I and sometimes it becomes a decision of necessity, that it creates more gravity and more intensity for a scene or for the story as a whole. And so when I go to killing a character, that's where that kind of comes into play. What is the best way to introduce a power without making it seem like a plot convenience? Ooh. That's kind of a good one. So in my first book, I introduce a character named Asher, and Asher actually is threaded throughout all four of the first four books. He is the central figure of book 3, but he's a part of the ensemble cast in book 1, and he shows up a few times in book 2, and once at the very end of book 4. And Asher's abilities, he kind of comes into them very suddenly. They're part of who he is, part of his natural abilities, but he doesn't know how to use them, and so he's got to learn. But there's nobody around who can actually teach him. So there's kind of that issue. One of the things that happens the most frequently to him, especially in book 3, is that he dies a lot. Talking about killing off characters. That actually became a plot convenience, but it became a necessary convenience. So Asher's abilities are celestial. So he looks like an angel when he's in his true form. He has the powers of a god. And with those abilities, he has the power to basically come back to life if he's killed in any kind of mortal sense. He has to be in his true form in order to truly die. And so the first time he actually dies in book 1, it kickstarts it triggers everything for him. So he dies, and he as he's about to breathe his last breath, that's when this healing factor kicks in. He heals, and it triggers his transformation. I kind of took a keynote from the Highlander series. I was a big fan of that series when I was in high school, and it kind of stuck with me. And so I like that idea of you can't have your immortality unless you die at least once. And so that kind of plays into it. But there's also kind of a messianic element to the character, especially in book 3, as he interacts with vampires. I don't want to give anything away because I want people to read the books, but yeah, there's a point and purpose to it. And so I had to introduce it. He had to die in order for his powers to kick in, and his powers don't mean anything without that sacrifice. Do you have any plans to turn the books into movies? Actually, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn them into an animated series, if I could. I've been really impressed with some of the animated series that Netflix has been putting out. Key among them has been the Voltron Legendary Defender series, and a few others. I've actually been really curious to see what my characters could look like in an animated setting. I mean, movies are great. I'm a big cinephile to begin with, but I think it would be best if this series was done episodically, because then it would make more sense. It's really kind of hard to condense a 350-page book into a 2 to 2.5 hour movie. I mean the best example we have of condensing a very large, dense book into just a few hours of film came from the Lord of the Rings. A great series, and unfortunately they took that idea and they ran with it with a much smaller book and turned it into 3 films. So I'd rather see something more episodic. I'd like to see the animation, because then with animation you can do so much, and it doesn't cost as much to animate as it would be to do live action film. Sure, you have to get vocal cast, but actually one of the things I did about a year and a half ago was I was posting on social media, specifically on Instagram, the vocal cast I would personally like to see for the characters in my first book, and a lot of them were really top-notch actors. Like for the part of Gavin and Nex. Nex is his dragon companion. I wanted to have James McAvoy do the voice of Gavin, and have uh, Daniel Radcliffe do the voice of Nex the dragon. I thought that would be really cool. Um, I'm seeing comments here about Boss Baby. Boss Baby is a terrible cartoon. You should never watch it. End of story. I'll have to Granola God. I'll have to take Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts into consideration. I'm actually kind of going. They just launched the second season of Altered Carbon, so I'm getting into that and doing my little mental uh, comparison between this season and how the last two books in that trilogy flowed. Um, Scott Pilgrim is an okay movie. Wasn't a big fan of the comics, um, and I'm sorry, but Michael Cera should never be a hero for anybody. It's Michael Cera. He is the first step in the evolution of the Pokemon that eventually turns into Andy Sandberg. Jonah Vera, that is a really cool idea. Yeah, and especially well, I mean, especially in a sword and sandal type era like the Bronze Age or the or something along the lines of like ancient Greek myth, something like that. That would be a lot of fun. I encourage you, and I would say depending on what kind of culture you want to focus on, if it's like ancient Near East, Middle East, Greece, Rome, it would be that would be good. Just make sure you do some research on those cultures and the kind of fantasy elements that you would see in those cultures. Um, what does GKJ stand for? That's kind of on the nose. My name is Garrett K. Jones. GKJ. Those are my initials. So my name is kind of a joke, kind of a pun. GKJ Publishing. I publish. My initials is GKJ. Um, hey, all right. Hockey stuff. Apple Watch gives me some great alerts. Okay. So what are some other? Cowboy Bebop. I'm not a fan of anime, to be honest with you. I mean, I like the original Voltron. I like the new Voltron. Um, I actually I'm a big fan of the Castlevania series that Netflix has put out. That's actually pretty good. But I also grew up with the video games for Castlevania. So uh, technically, Legend of Korra is not anime. It's drawn in that style, but anime only comes from Japan, and the artists were doing stuff here in the United States and Korea. But no, anything the Avatar: The Last Airbender series and Legends of Korra, both great animated series. I would love to partner up with the creators of that series to do an animated series of my books because I think that would be a lot of fun. So yeah. However, speaking of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Netflix is actually doing a live action series. They are working with the original creators and the original writers to do a live action series that is supposed to do the show justice in a way that the 2010 M. Night Shyamalan dumpster fire did not. Okay, Daniel Merlos, dude, where's my car? Seriously? What? Okay. Is the implementation of mental health issues in certain teen nonfiction issue or not? That's actually a really good question. So, with regards to mental health, I do have some elements where characters are dealing with some post-traumatic stress. They're dealing with some of the ramifications of their decisions in previous books or previous chapters within the same book. Um, One of the things I was writing in book 5 is one of the main characters. Her name is Aya. She is a central character. She is that's been a challenge for me to write because I'm not a 20-year-old woman. Um, the For her, she experiences some things on the early onset of the story that really kind of freak her out, and uh, in the process, she's got to deal with that trauma. And one of the scenes, about halfway through the book, has her uh, cutting herself with a shard of pottery, and it as she's doing it, and while she's doing this, she's actually watching an execution take place. A criminal that she came in contact with about a chapter or so before. Um, he was arrested, and she's watching the execution, and she's just sitting there, cutting on her wrist, and it's healing. I wonder which character she gets that from. But she cuts herself, she heals. She cuts herself, she heals. So it's leaving these lines of where the blood was starting to leak out, but no scars or anything like that. Although the skin is raw and kind of fresh. So I do deal with some mental health issues, but like it's not like a whole awareness thing. That's not what I'm going for. Um, but I have my moments, my commentary and stuff like that. Um, Thinking of starting a series if God was a girl. There's a few other people that you might want to read on that, because I'm sure there's other people who have come up with something similar, whether it's academic work or fiction. But no, that sounds like a very interesting premise. What are your thoughts on Fortnite? Terrible video game. Um, what is the best way to give a character depth? So, as you're reading a story, you're going to encounter how the characters are developed based on their actions, their reactions, and their choices, and the consequences, and how they deal with those consequences. So, one of the things I like to watch on YouTube is a series called Lessons from the Screenplay, and they take a look at screenplays. They look at film. In this 6.5 to 7 minute sequence, you learn all of just in the choices that Bond makes. You not even the dialogue; it's the choices, the actions, and the steps that he takes. You learn about his personal faults. You learn about his weaknesses. You learn about his strengths, and you see what makes him a good agent, what makes him an untrustworthy agent, and uh, he gets a little careless. He gets a little reckless, stuff like that. Um, so the so it depends on what kind of situations you're dealing with. I think I think that if you are interested in looking at character studies, there are a lot of resources on there, on the internet, especially on YouTube. You can find Masterclass is a great location to find that. But one of the things I'm looking at doing is I'm looking at partnering with. There's a local bookstore here that just opened up in mid-February downtown. I'm going to be partnering with them to do like a weekend workshop class, and that might be one of the things that we cover, character depth. So that's a great. But my recommendation for character depth is look at how they react to certain situations around them. What kind of choices do they make? How do they respond or react to those situations or circumstances? What kind of people do they interact with? Their word choices. Um, all of that plays into character depth. No, I'm not going to kill a character called Granola God. That would not be cool. Can you do a push for me? A push up for me? No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm leaning on a table, dude. Um, lag. Okay, great, wonderful. Tizzy Miller's not a rap store. So the bookstore I mentioned is called um, uh, My Eyes y Corazon. They moved over from Visalia, from downtown Visalia. They're now where Generation Gap used to be, on the corner of 8th Street and Irwin, about half a block over from DJ's Collectibles in downtown Hampton. I've been in the store. They're in the process of setting up, and hopefully in the next month or so, copies of my books will be on sale at their location. But you can find them on Facebook. Um, But yeah. Let's see. No, I'm going to skip that question because it's completely irrelevant. Do you believe in coronavirus? It's all over the news. It's real. Do I think it's that big of a threat? No. And that's not even going to plan. It's not even here nor there. So we've got about 20 minutes left. Actually less than that because I have to be off by 8 o'clock. So, what are some other questions you guys have about writing, about uh, writing fantasy? Do I believe in Mormonism? No, I don't. I'm not Mormon. It exists, but that's, again, neither here nor there. Let's stay on point, please. So, writing, publishing questions, uh, genre questions, stuff like that. Um, Actually, I want to kind of turn attention to publishing. Actually, publishing is actually probably one of the hardest things to really discuss because there's no one way to go about doing that. What are your thoughts on reviving a dead character? Oh, okay. So I'll come back to that. Um, so publishing, there's no one way of doing publishing. I do self-publishing, which means I go through the process of paying for an editor, um, paying for fee that you sell. And if you create a new version of the book, so like if you take it down, you edit the book, you put it back up, you have to have a new ISBN number. Or if you transition it from a paperback copy to a audiobook, you have to get a new ISBN number for that audiobook. But then you've got traditional publishing. Part of the problem with traditional publishing is most publishers won't look at your book unless they are presented it by a literary agent. Most literary agents are fickle. You have to pitch your ideas, and they only take like an elevator pitch, like every couple of months or so. It's like every 4 or 5 months they'll do that. And if you go onto Twitter and you follow the writing community, there's a hashtag. It's PITMAD, PITMAD. And if you follow that hashtag, you'll see people all over the writing community pitching little elevator pitches, little like one sentence tweets with that hashtag PITMAD, trying to get the attention of literary agents who are on Twitter looking for new material to talk to publishers. And it's a really hard industry to get into. I go through self-publishing because it's a little bit easier for me to deal with. It comes out of my pocket, but I get direct control over what I'm putting out and royalties I get and how much I'm making. All right, so back to the question here. What are your thoughts on reviving a dead character? Well, it depends on which character. You have to be picky and choosy with how you do that. Um, I don't want to give anything away, but I actually am in the process at the end of book 5 reviving a character who only shows up for one chapter in book 1. This character is incredibly important to the series, and I've made a point of kind of laying the groundwork throughout the first 4 books of this happening. No one, it's kind of really under the radar. No one really pays attention to it until the moment that it happens. And I really had to be careful about what clues, what hints, what I was doing to bring this about. It's not like in comic books where, like, like Jean Grey from the X-Men, she dies like every other year. Somehow it's in connection to the Phoenix Force, and then bam, she's back to life again. I mean, personally, in the comics, since the introduction of the Phoenix Force, I've probably seen that character die like 3 or 4 times, personally, in my own collection. randomly reviving characters doesn't work, because then the rules for that govern life and death, those kinds of things, it really makes it challenging to take the series seriously. People can just come back to life whenever they feel like it, or just random things happen because that one character has to come back to life. That there's no fun with that. So, any other questions? Anybody? Well, actually, I think this is probably one of the more productive live streams I've done in a while. Um, all right. Well, I want to give a heads up about what's coming up down the pipeline this over the course of the next few weeks. I have a new top 10 list of uh, that I'm going to be putting out a week from today on the 7th. Yeah, that would be the 7th. That topic for the top 10 is going to be the top 10 audiobooks that I'm recommending, because I've got a whole slew of them that I've been listening to, and I'm making that recommendation. Um, the second week, or the second weekend of March, I have a new author awareness video. I've got a new author I'm going to be interviewing. It's going to be a really good interview. Um, I've got a new Creators Corner segment that I'll be doing, and I'm not sure on that one yet. I think I'll be talking about like creating tension in your writing, something along those lines, maybe, or maybe it might be introducing a character. I'm not sure yet. I'm kind of open-ended on that. However, coming up the pipeline this coming Monday is a brand new episode of the Creators Corner podcast. Again, it can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anchor.fm/GKJ Publishing. And it can be found on the website, my website, archivesofthefivekingdoms.com. And the topic, I've been going through a series talking about breaking out of the comfort zone. The season of the podcast is actually called Welcome to the Danger Zone, because being a creative person, you're going to run into the dangerous situation of having to put yourself out there and share your creative work with other people, which is all part and parcel for being a creator. So this episode that's going to be launching on the 2nd is entitled The Growth Zone. This is where you encounter growth. So far in the podcast episodes that have been launched, I've talked about being in the comfort zone, breaking out of it, and finding yourself in the fear zone, and then going into the learning zone, which is what was published this last week. This next week is all about growth as a writer, as a creator. And then in 2 weeks, the 16th, that's when my interview with Tizzy Miller is going to be live on the podcast. And it's not live; it's already been pre-recorded, but that's when it will be available. And so, yeah. Anything else? Anything at all? Bye, Tanya. I'll see you later. So I'm gonna take a look at my my list of things I was supposed to do. Okay. So we did my welcome, plugging the website and the vlogs and the podcast. Yeah, I did that. Talked about the update for book 5 and the audiobook. Talked about new cover art for books 1 through 4. We did our open forum, so we've been doing pretty good with that. 5 minutes before close, I think we're just about there. Yeah, we're just there. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying thank you for watching. I really and participating. I really appreciate this. Glad you guys were able to join. And so, uh, if you are interested in getting more content like this, please make sure that you subscribe and click the bell icon on my channel so that you get notifications of new videos. You can click it, you can set it for all videos, or you can select, you can personalize it and have your selection of whatever content you want. I've got a couple of different playlists. There's the vlog volume 2, vlog season 2 podcast, not podcast, but playlist. Uh, and then that covers everything that's in this current season, which will wrap up in August. Then I have the author awareness playlist, which is just the author interviews from season 1 and season 2. The uh, creators corner playlist, again season 1, season 2, and the forming fantasy playlist, which is season 1 and season 2. Great question, Tanya. She wanted to ask before she left, what kind of pizza do I like? So long as it doesn't have pineapple or mushrooms on it, I'm pretty good with it. However, my favorite kind of pizza, hands down, is going to be either a really nice 4-cheese pizza or 5 cheese, depending if you can get a good 5th cheese in there, or a pizza margherita, which is just red sauce, mozzarella, a little bit of Parmesan, and some fresh basil. Mwah. Oh, and you have to have some garlic on that, some roasted garlic. So yeah. All right, so I'm going to be wrapping it up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being a part of this. I cannot do this without you people, and hopefully you guys will be able to provide some more support. If you do want to donate, I saw a comment about donating a little while ago. I'm not sure how to go about doing that with regards to YouTube, but I'm going to be reestablishing a stronger presence on Patreon here in the next few weeks, maybe a month or so, with new support tiers. So yeah, I'll post that out when it's available. Check you guys later. Have a great night.